better nerd out, better put specs on, better break necks on. I cut handsome checks for my expansion sets. They call me.
What's going on, comic fam? It is your boy, the Bearded Comic Bro, and I am joined for another creator interview with Charlie Stickney, and I am so happy to have you on.
Oh, I'm thrilled to be here. Thanks for having me so much.
Yeah. So, my first interview I actually did a couple weeks ago with Rylan Grant, and I got into his Aberrant and Van Jackson, was super into his stuff, and in the middle of our interview, your name came up. And he said, if you haven't read White Ash, you have to go check it out. So after the interview ended, I bought White Ash issue 1 and read it and fell in love with it. So I then bought it online again, but I couldn't wait. So I got some digital copies of 2 and 3 so I could catch up. So I'm at 3. I've got a scout box coming with 4 in it here
fantastic.
real soon. So,
yeah.
So I'm excited, but I guess just to get started here, how did you get into creating comics?
Well, so I set out when I was in college, I was going to go into comics. Like that was the goal. And when I was a junior in college, I interned at Marvel. So the plan all along was I'm going to be a comic book writer. I'm going to move down to New York City. I did some art. I was going to be an inker too, kind of like splitting those two worlds. And, and then I got a job offer in California because I was also a film major in college. Okay. And so I said, okay, you know what, I'll get back to the comics eventually, in a couple of years. I mean, and then all of a sudden I was in LA, and then I was working in animation, and then I was working in low budget film, and then I was working in feature film. And there was just never an opportunity for me to get back to comics. So for me, and then about 4 or 5 years ago, I you could see the shift in the industry where, because of the Marvel films, because of everything else, people just wanted to make things based on comics. You go out with a script pitch and people would say to you, hey, this is great. Is it based on something? And I'd say, yeah, it's based on the script I wrote. It's really good. You're going to like it. I got tired of bashing my head against the wall, trying to sell people an original story. I mean, it's crazy to think that they just didn't want an original story. And I said, where people really enjoy original stories is comics. And so I was fortunate because like I said, I worked in animation, so I had a lot of connections there, and I knew, people in the comic industry. And I said, I am just going to, I'm going to go and make stories the way I want to make them. And because even when you're working with a studio, I've had films that have been optioned, and you work for 2 or 3 years, and then they hire another writer who comes in for 2 or 3 years. And then 2 or 3 years later, now 6 years down the line, nothing's happened. It has nothing to do with that original script that was, optioned. And so I said, I can make these ideas that I have exactly the way I want. And it's what I had originally set out to do until I got kind of waylaid into, all these other things where you never make anything, but you get paid a little money. And so, getting paid is always good.
Right.
So I said, you know what, rather than getting paid, I'd rather make the thing I want to make. And so it's a trade-off. I mean, Don't get me wrong, there's not a lot of money in comics. And I think, people trying to get into comics, you need to realize that, but you can make great stories, and you can make them the way you want to make them. And I've been really fortunate teaming up with a great team on White Ash and a couple of other projects I'm working on right now to be able to make the stories I always set out to make the way I wanted to make them.
That's cool. Well, you mentioned your team, and you have your art on White Ash is great. And the Hughes and Cram, I think it really complements your writing for the story that you guys are trying to tell in this issue of White Ash. How did you kind of get connected with them? How did this creative team come together?
Well, so I basically put an ad online in I think like 4 or 5 different forums. And I said I was offering money to do a comic book. And it was amazing how many people popped up. I probably had somewhere in the vicinity of 300 people who said they wanted to draw my comic book. A good 200 of them, you knew right away that it wasn't someone that was going to be a right fit. for the book. But like I said, I worked in animation for a while. So one of my friends is a big storyboard director, and he's worked on everything from like Bob's Burgers to Hellboy to Black Dynamite to, you know, Tron. Like he has been the storyboard artist or the storyboard director on many of these things. So he sat with me and we went through some submissions, and he's like, oh, this guy's good. Oh, this is a team of artists trying to, you know, from Indonesia, trying to say they're one guy. And then we got to this one, which was Connor Hughes. And he said, who's this guy? And I was like, I don't know. And like, there was nothing on him. Like there was, Connor was just like an unknown from nowhere. But he was so good. And what was great about him was his storytelling. And I think when you're a writer, that's what you're really looking for. I mean, style is great, and he can draw sexy characters and he can draw real characters, but he draws characters that know how to act, that tells the story, you know, just the way it needs to be told. And, you know, like his story was, he had gone to the School of Visual Arts to be a comic book artist. And then, you know, he graduated and he had this desire he felt like he needed to get a real job rather than comic book arts. So he became the in-house graphic designer at the UN.
Oh, wow.
You know, so like that was his day job, you know, like, so he was doing really well. And, you know, he started getting the itch to go back to doing comics. And, you know, Mark Millar had that talent search a couple of years ago, and it was over at Image, and he was one of the first winners of that. But they paired him with a colorist who didn't really compliment his work, and nothing came of it. And so then he was just like, I don't know. And then he just on a lark answered my ad. And, you know, we have now been working together for about 3 years, and everything he does gets better as it goes along. So you'll see that in White Ash. Like the 6th issue was so much better than the first. You know, we're doing this other series on the side called The Game, which is a sci-fi series, and that's also incredible. So it's been nice to see his evolution, you know, as we've been working together.
Yeah.
You know, it's just really grown.
That's so cool. So you just said 6 issues right now. Are you guys planning for White Ash? Is it more of like a maxi series? Are you trying to go ongoing? Like, how big is this world that you're creating?
It's about as big as you can possibly think.
Okay.
So there are 6 issues already done.
Okay.
That's the first arc. We are, you know, have already started on the second arc right now. I have it plotted out for about 60 issues.
Oh, wow.
And you know, it goes back, like there's a back history, so we're going them back in time about 3,000 years of back history. There's a spin-off series that's going to be coming out later this summer, which also tells some more of that backstory. So I have like 3 different spin-off mini-series that will be filling in some of those gaps that'll be coming out over the next couple of years. So we're building something really big. Yeah, and there's a lot of stuff that's already been seeded that's going to happen 2-3 years down the road.
So you said you guys have said you've been working together for 3 years. I feel like, because correct me if I'm wrong, White Ash started as a Kickstarter, correct? And then it got picked up. And did that kind of talk about that a little bit?
So I think people need to understand the economics of comics. It's really changed over the last couple of years. So if you're looking to say, as an independent creator, make a comic book series, unless you have a huge name, there's really not enough revenue coming in from most of the publishers to be able to sustain a series. You can do a mini series, you can do maybe 6 issues, but after that, the numbers for single issue sales drop so low that you're not making any money. You take a series like Crowded. I don't know if you know Crowded. It's an Image. You know, an Image is about the best deal that you can get as a creator.
Right.
And, you know, it was nominated for an Eisner last year. I think it's nominated again for an Eisner Award this year. Yeah. And, you know, they sell about 3,500 copies per issue, right? And if you do the numbers on that, that means they're not, even though they're being published and 3,500 copies are coming out, there's no money coming back to the creators on that. Jeez. So because of the way the thing is split, you know, you need to, at Image, you need to be selling somewhere in the neighborhood of probably about 8,000 copies to break even. You know, and because like they have their publishing fees, their printing fees, and all of that eats up with your revenue. And if you go to a site like Comicron, which shows the numbers of where sales are, And I'm sorry, I'm getting real macro on
No,
this.
this is what I want. This is great.
If you look at that and you see how many different comic series are selling right now that do, say, over 10,000 copies per issue, you will find, aside from Marvel, DC, that there's probably about 8 to 10 at most Image titles that do numbers bigger than that. And the ones at IDW or Boom or Dynamite that do over that are all licensed properties. It's the Turtles, it's
Right.
Vampirella. If it's and then maybe like Something's Killing the Children.
Okay.
Like a big
Yep.
hit will do good numbers. But aside from that, there's like almost all the creator-owned books that you see coming out are barely making any money, and they're hardly making enough back to pay for the artists. So as a creator, if you want to build something that's sustainable, you have to look at, how can I maximize my revenue stream? Some people are like, okay, I'm going to option my comic book and turn it into a movie, and that's where the money is going to come from. That happens, but like the amount of money that will come from that and the amount of time that it takes to happen also makes it an unfeasible goal. So I think like what's happened with filmmaking nowadays is a lot of different studios partner together, or they'll partner with an overseas studio. Like, I'll put in 100 million, you'll put in 100 million, and together we'll make the movie. We'll distribute it overseas. We'll do, or you have television shows where Netflix says we've got the second run rights for it, right?
Yeah.
And like say you like Supernatural,
Okay.
or The Magicians, right?
Yep.
Like, but you don't have the Sci-Fi Network, so you can't see The Magicians. But you wait like 6 months to a year later, and then that season is on Netflix, or BBC America with Doctor Who, or whatever it is, right? Like, that's a paradigm that a lot of us are used to, right? We don't have that cable, but we'll wait for it to come to Netflix, which we're paying for, right?
Right. Yep.
It's a little bit cheaper for us. So that's kind of the model I set out to do with what I was going to do with publishing. I thought to myself, if I can fund these books on Kickstarter and pay for them, it's a slightly different edition, which has a different format than what's going to later come to Scout. So on Kickstarter, I do slightly bigger books. Like the first White Ash I did was 52 pages. That then becomes the first 2 issues that Scout does. But we add some new pages, we add some new covers. So those are the first time they've ever been published. But Scout becomes like our Netflix, right?
Okay. Yeah.
Like, if you want to pay a premium, like you're paying for that cable, that extra cable, so you can see those things right away, that's our Kickstarter. If you want to still get it and still get a great copy of it, you get your Netflix subscription. That's your Scout. It comes out about a year later through Scout, and it's just as good. In fact, in some ways it's better, because then I look back at it and say, oh, okay, I'm adding this page. We're going to fix the dialogue here. And it gives me a second chance to kind of do a pass to make it even better. But because the Kickstarter, I broke even, I can then afford to make the series and make a little money or no money at Scout. And it's about, getting the books to people so they can read it.
Right.
So I get the best of both worlds. I can create a series that people can hopefully will sustain itself, and I don't go broke.
Right.
And then everyone gets to read it. So it's like a win-win, because on Kickstarter, a lot of books will be $20, $30, $40 for a comic, and which is just gets a little crazy. And so, for me, this is the paradigm that I'm trying to use, which, if you just think of it as that premium cable and Netflix model, that's kind of what I'm doing. And I think that makes sense to a lot of people.
It does.
But we also put brand new covers on. And like I said, there's new content in the Scout version. So really those are, that's also a collectible too. So we have people who want to get both. And, it's a whole 2 different audiences.
Yeah. That's well. And I think too, if you're doing it via Kickstarter to start, you are already building that following, and it's investing in your book, which then you have that following of people who are going to be like me, who are going to try and figure out how to find older stuff now, because I've found Scout, and and then start to catch on. So like, I'm assuming you're still going to be doing Kickstarters in the future with White Ash. And
yeah. So we actually just wrapped up a Kickstarter. So like I was saying, the episodes, the issues are slightly different between the 2, which also kind of makes it different. So like the first arc in Kickstarter was issues 1 through 4.
Okay.
That became issues 1 through 6 through Scout. There's probably about 8 new pages in the Scout version, but the original versions were much bigger books. So
Okay.
like the first issue was a 52 page, and then we had a 30, and then a 32, and then a 40. All the Scout books are anywhere from 22 to 26 pages. Actually, number 4, which is coming out, is a 32-page book.
Okay.
Nice. Yeah. So like that's a good book for $3.99.
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So like that's what you're getting next, and issue 4 is just fantastic.
I can't wait.
Yeah. So we just did a Kickstarter for issue 5.
Okay.
Probably be issue 7, maybe 7 and 8 over at Scout, which will come out in another year or so.
Yeah.
And then we have we're going to have a one-shot coming out via Scout later this year, which is like 3 short stories, which again fill in some character gaps. And there's a character that's introduced in this next issue, in issue 4.
Okay.
You may have seen her on the cover.
Yep. Okay.
That character is the subject of these 3 short stories that'll be coming out later this year, and also the mini series that's going to be coming out later this year on Kickstarter.
Yeah. Well, man, I will tell you, like I said, I read issue 1, and as I was reading issues 1 and 2, I'm going, okay, I have an idea of where you're going. And then you see that last panel on page 2, I go, okay, or on cover 2, on issue 2, I was like, okay,
Sure, right.
This is taking a different path than I thought we were going. And from there, it officially hooked me, because I'm like, okay, we're going to open up a universe that I was not expecting, but I'm so here for that ride. So talk for the people that maybe are watching this for the first time and haven't been exposed to White Ash, can you just kind of bring them into the world a little bit?
Sure. So the quick pitch is it's Romeo and Juliet meets Lord of the Rings in rural Pennsylvania, which is, it's not actually Romeo and Juliet, but there's a romance, there's
Right.
lots of fantasy, but it's fantasy creep. So it's like fantasy set in the real world, what feels like the real world, and then you start realizing, oh wait, there's a whole fantasy level that's slowly creeping in. The other quick pitch I like to say is like, imagine if the guys from Supernatural got stuck in Riverdale, but rather than battling demons from hell, they had to deal with the worst of Mordor. So, it's like
Yeah.
I think those are the kind of things, like you've got it's a little sexy at times, you've got a romance going on, but it's really about a young guy who comes from this coal mining town who can't wait to get out. And on the day he's about to get out, there's an accident at the mine. And all of a sudden, these secrets start coming out with that blow his mind and let him realize that there's a lot more going in this town that he hates. And so it's the first arc is about his decision: does he want to embrace this legacy that he's a part of, or does he just want to say goodbye and leave it all behind? So
cool. Yeah, it captivates me, because I'm reading it, and I went in with the vision of, okay, it came off like it's going to be a vampire book, and then, like you said, you see that it's a bigger world, fantasy world, and your descriptions are perfect. And if anyone's watching that and is not like, I want to read that now, I don't know what they're doing.
Well, my kind of storytelling, the kind of story I like to tell is, I don't like to rush into anything. I like to take the time to build the world. And this is, again, the luxury I have because I've done it through Kickstarter. Right. Like if I was just going through Scout, I'd have to make sure everything about the entire comic was in that first 22 pages, right? Because you have to hook as many people as possible. So I get to take my time, because I've already got this other audience, and it just lets me get to know the characters, get to know the world. There's a little bit of this going on, and then all of a sudden I can just pull the rug out from under you and say, oh no, it's not that. Yeah. And it's going to keep doing that, because there's multiple layers of things going on. So just when you think you kind of feel like you have a handle on things, there's going to be another layer that's revealed. And there's the slogan for the town is, the smaller the town, the bigger the secrets.
Right.
And I have just packed it full of things that you don't know about the characters and the world. And so we're going to keep revealing those, and hopefully, everyone's going to enjoy the ride.
Yeah, no, it's been a blast so far. Is there a basis for like, kind of like the creative process of like coming about this, of like setting it in a coal mining town, like, because you said you're out in LA, like, are you connected to Western Pennsylvania? Like, is that part of, and
So there's a couple of things. I'm from the East Coast originally. I grew
Okay.
up in Maine. So I grew up in a really small town of like 7,000 people. So I know that small town
right.
life feel, and wanting to get out and do something, find something more, which I think is the core of the story. Like, I think for any of us who come from a small town or a place, we're always looking for something more out of life. There's got to be more than this, right?
Yep.
So like that's the essence of where that vibe comes from. But specifically, there's without giving too much away, there's a giant white ash tree that's in the town, and like as you know, the coal mining is an important aspect of the story in more than ways than one, right? About who these
Right.
miners are.
Yep.
So it's like, so I needed to have a white ash tree, and I needed to have coal mining, and I wanted a place that had been around for a long time. So it had to be like, we had to be looking at one of the original 13 colonies, 13
Yep.
states, 13 colonies. And so it was coming down to either West Virginia, around that area, or Western Pennsylvania. And then, so for me, there was a lot, the white ash tree is more natural to the Pennsylvania region than it is to the West Virginian region. So, so yes, there was a very specific reason why it's set there.
That's so cool.
And then plus Pennsylvania is like, it's a great place. There are some amazing comic book fans in Pennsylvania. So, that helps too.
So I'm telling you guys, if you have not gotten into white ash yet, you go pick it up, go to your local store, catch it on, and start following along on the Kickstarters, because I can't wait. Like I've said, I'm going to try and backtrack because I'm impatient. So I'm gonna be coming from the beginning, and I'll be playing catch up on the well, we've talked a little bit about Kickstarter, and one of the things, in talking with Rylan, your name came up because Rylan and I were in his interview. We were getting ready to promote his Kickstarter that he just released last week, and he said he learned a lot about doing Kickstarters from you, and just kind of how that went about. So we've kind of already bridged into why you went the Kickstarter route, and you mentioned when we were talking beforehand that you actually have another project coming out here really soon, right?
Yeah. So, and this actually ties back into Ryland too. So he and I know each other from LA. He's also from Los Angeles. And I've been on a couple of his panels about how to kickstart comics. So he's moderated a couple of panels and then sort of just took notes as I've been.
That's what he said. He said, he goes, I moderated panels and I would just steal ideas and make notes.
Yeah. He's like, and that's the way to do it. David Avalone, who was on with us, he's a great guest and he's really funny, but his advice is like, he did this Kickstarter for Drawing Blood. I don't know if you know that book.
It is. So I found them both. I was watching the Mainframe Comic Con a month ago or something now.
Yeah.
And they were both on a panel talking about networking in comic industry. And Rylan was talking about Banjax, so I was like, that sounds interesting. I got to pick it up. And then David was mentioned Drawing Blood, and grew up, I have a Turtles arcade cabinet in my basement here. So like, I was like, I need to read that too.
Well, so like David Avalone's advice for people is, he's like, if you want to have a successful Kickstarter, he's like, have Kevin Eastman be part of it.
Right.
Which, it works for him. The rest of us,
and I'm wearing a turtle shirt, so
there you go. So the rest of us have to do a little bit more work to make ours successful. But I've been really fortunate. So I built up a really I have a large fan base on Kickstarter, and it gives me the freedom to do these books. So I was on this panel that Ryland had at Los Angeles Comic Con on Kickstarting panels, and afterwards, this company came to approach me called Immortal Studios, and they said, "Hey, we're looking to start a comic book company. Would you be willing to work with us to write our first title and help us build an interconnected martial arts universe?" And I said, yes, yes, I would. and you know, and like these, I mean, these guys are great. They come from like Peter, who is the owner of the company. His father is from China, and he created a lot of the wushu martial arts movies and TV shows. So like since as a kid, he's been immersed in this genre. So what he wanted to do was create an authentic book that brought, you know, these forms and this legacy, you know, like the real version of Kung Fu to
Yeah.
comics. And so we started assembling a team, and we've created this comic book series. The first series that we're launching is called The Adept, which is going to be kicking off the universe. It's launching on Monday. You know, they also are going to be doing lots of putting it out in different places, but they want to build an audience on Kickstarter. And so I'm co-writing it with Tasha Hu and Yishan Lee. I don't know if you know Yishan Lee. She did Swing at Top Cow. I don't know if you've ever seen that book.
Mm-hmm.
She's done Buffy the Vampire Slayer for Dark Horse.
Okay.
She did this other book called Paradox Girl. She has a little bit of a manga style, but she's incredible. And so here, hold on a second, I'll give you a little taste. I can change now that we're talking about The Adept.
Nice.
You know, and we also have a Kung Fu master who is actually working with us to make sure the forms the characters are using are all legitimate.
That's awesome.
So like the layout stage of the book, he's going through the fight scene saying, no, this is how, you know, like use the drunken, you know, the drunken zebra form,
yeah,
or whatever. You're like, again, that like the wonderful thing about working in this method is I don't have to know, you know, like my job is to tell a great story and help build some great characters. And that's what I do with Tasha. And, you know, like, and this book centers on this young woman who, when she's about 6 years old, starts being visited in her dreams by this master, right? And he starts training her, and she has no idea if it's real or if it's not, or like this really a dream. And until she's about 15, she's just off on her own during the day, training and doing what she learned in the dreams. And then the dreams stop, and she's left wondering, was I crazy? You know, was this really happening? And she's like given up everything to kind of go off into the woods and train to follow these dream visions, and she has no connection, and she's cut off. And so like the book opens with her trying to reconnect with her sister. You know, they're both in their 20s now, and in the middle of trying to reconnect, there's this terrorist attack, and like at this concert, and all of a sudden on the jumbotron, she sees the master from her dreams fighting off, you know, these seeming terrorists. And she's like, I don't know what's going on, but there are my answers. You know, I have to get to him in the middle of terrorist attack. And then she has to put, you know, all these years of training that she, you know, doesn't even know if are real. Like, am I crazy to sort of wade into a firefight? I don't know what I'm doing, you know, like to get her answers. And so basically it's about her taking up the mantle. And the mantra of the company is you know, it's all about finding the hero within all of us. And so, you know, for her, I mean, she had a lot of traumatic things going on in her childhood, and we'll be going back, you know, again to her childhood, back to the history, you know, the history of the martial arts form and things about 300 years. So we'll be jumping all through time. But this whole thing, which is authentic to Kung Fu, to the forms, and to the experience that hopefully that this young woman is going through as she tries to embrace the hero inside her.
That's so cool. And so so that's dropping, the Kickstarter's dropping on Monday. Now, is this a start of a series kind of thing, or is it kind of a, you know, a story wrapped up all in one here?
No, this is the first issue. It's gonna be a 40-page issue.
Okay.
We're trying to make, I think actually I'm sorry, it's 42 pages. We bumped it up to 42. We added a big spread in the middle. So now it's 42. So it's like, it's good bang for your buck.
Yeah.
And this is the first issue of The Adept. The Adept's going to be, you know, we're going to start off with a 6-issue miniseries, and assuming people like it, there will be more, but it's going to be part of an interconnected universe. So there are other titles that are going to be coming out later this year.
Okay.
And I can't say because, you know, I'm under restraints in terms of who else is coming on board the project, but there are some big name comic book writers who have already signed on to write some of the other stories. So it's really going to be a great universe, and I'm very fortunate to be able to sort of you know, write the first chapter.
Yeah, that's now, and you said, so this is going to be kind of launched underneath this studio that is this comic studio that's creating, that's
Yeah.
kind of starting out, right? So
Mhm.
is all their, if you can't say, that's fine, but is all
Yeah.
their kind of books and titles that they're looking at all going to be focused on the Adept right now? Or is it going to kind of, is just kind of one aspect that they're going to span off of then is just,
So, I think like the core concept with, with Shaolin, with martial arts is like, there's kind of like different power levels.
yeah,
Like there's the big, super powerful martial arts, the guy who can basically, destroy boulders with his mind, down to the adept. So ours is like, it kind of, if you look at it, like the difference between the Punisher and Captain Marvel,
right.
right? And the Punisher is dealing with maybe more the street level. So this is the most grounded
Okay.
of the books. But there are going to be bigger and bigger books that will be coming out. So they're all part of the same universe
Gotcha.
and their own stories. And then, down the road, I'm sure they'll all be getting together.
Yeah.
So like I said, it's interconnected. So it's building towards something. So there's big stories and big plans, but this is like, if you want to check it out, this is where you get in. And Tasha, my co-writer on this, she's incredible. And again, I can't say because like it's not out yet, but she is also writing a huge film right now. So it's like I get to work with just this incredible woman, and to help us craft these stories together.
So I don't want to take up too much more of your
Yeah.
time. I appreciate it. Can I just, how does that kind of process work then of like co-writing and then also like working with an artist? Because I mean, I know you even said earlier in the interview, you're, on the Hughes artist on White Ash, he really can tell a story in his drawing. So like, how much is it direction with that, and how is that kind of coming along, co-writing that, kind of crafting these stories?
So I mean, I think the thing to understand is with comic book writing, there's a huge variety of how micro you go with the directions, right? Like on one end of the spectrum, there's Alan Moore,
Right.
right? Who's like, okay, the person's sitting in this chair, his back is at a 43-degree angle. The chair is an aged redwood that came from this curio shop. And here, like it's got 5 paint flecks that are missing. Here's a photo of it. If you don't do this, you'll redraw it. Like that level of specificity. Here's the lens you're going to use on the camera. The frame should encompass from here to here. Versus, like the old Marvel method where someone would say, here's 5 pages of, like, of like when I was interning at Marvel, I read a couple of the early Peter David scripts for
Mm-hmm.
the Incredible Hulk, and it would be like a 6-page treatment that would have some dialogue. Then the artist would go and draw it, and then they would go back and add the dialogue to the panels afterwards. So like there's such a range.
Yeah.
When I'm working with Connor, I go a little bit more screenplay style.
Okay.
So I'll break everything down into panels, and I'll imply what the shot should be. But unless there's something very specific, I leave it to him to interpret.
Okay.
Because, we've worked together for a long time. So I break up the panels because for me, that's the rhythm.
Mm-hmm.
And then I leave the cinematography to him. Right.
Yeah.
But like you can tell how tight something should feel
Right.
from the emphasis that I put in the shot. So because I'm working with Yishan on this and we haven't worked before, I have a little more specificity in terms of the camera angles and the shots, but it's a kind of like a letter that you write back and forth. So I say, hey, if you can feel like a better way that you think that would work to break down the action here, please do. And then specifically for the action scenes, because we are working with someone who's helping choreograph the action scenes, there's also another person who's weighing
Right.
in. In terms of with a co-writer, it depends, because I've co-written scripts before for feature film, and I've done plenty of work on my own. So it just depends on the co-writer you're working with. With this, I laid out a very detailed story.
Okay.
Then Tasha did a pass and did dialogue, and then I came back in and I did a dialogue tweak pass, and then I broke it into to panels and things like that. And then so we just kind of took turns and talked it back and forth. So it's been really fun working with her.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have a collaborator who's additive, I mean, I think that's always great.
Right.
And I've been very fortunate that everyone I've worked with in comics helps me up the bar of what I do.
Right. That's so cool.
Yeah.
Well, I'm grateful, like I said, for you coming on.
Yeah.
I wanna give you a chance. Obviously, you've got this Kickstarter coming on. If they're, how can people find you? Also, if there's any last things that you kind of want to plug, whatever, But I want to give you a chance to kind of have the last word here before we wrap up. So.
No, I appreciate that. People can always find me at Charles Stickney. I would have gone with Charlie, but it was taken. So you can find me there. There's a link right there to sign up for the Adept, so you can be notified on day one. With the launch of that, the first couple of days, there's going to be some specials where you can get things cheaper. I always do that with my Kickstarter to kind of reward the people who come back to campaigns. So you can save a couple of bucks if you back on the first day. And also, like sometimes there's these limited edition awards. We had sketch covers for the last White Ash, where Connor would actually do whatever character you wanted on a cover for you as one of the rewards. We have original art, things like that, and those go really quick.
Yeah.
So, you can always find me there. I'm happy to answer questions on Kickstarter, on comic book writing, on TV writing or film writing. So like that's the best place to find me. And, I've got the Adept coming out on Monday. Later this summer, there will be a called Glarian. It's a White Ash spin-off series.
Okay.
If you like what you see in the beginning of the next issue of White Ash, you're going to want to be part of that Kickstarter.
All right. That's
and then I have another series, which is a sci-fi series. I like to quickly pitch that is if Sam from Quantum Leap ended up in the body of the Highlander. Which it's surprising. Like I use that reference and sometimes it's going over people's heads. Like imagine, or someone from Dollhouse ending up in the body of the Highlander. Yep. That's also something I'm doing with Connor, but instead of Fincram, Triona Farrell does the colors for that, and she's also incredible. And that will be coming out later in October. We'll be the next 2 issues of that.
That's so cool. So, and I'll have in the video, we'll have links to all of Charlie's stuff and Kickstarters and stuff. Comic Family, if you guys have not followed him up, follow his stuff on Instagram, like he said, get into White Ash. Check out his Kickstarter that's dropping this Monday. You will not be disappointed because I know I will hopefully be right up there Monday, hopping on some tier. So we'll see how high of a tier I'm allowed to go. All these Kickstarters are coming out. So, thank you again so much for your time. So.
No, I really appreciate being on. It's really great to get a chance to talk. And I think, the other thing, if you have a beard, you're going to enjoy White Ash. I'm just going to throw that out there.
Yep.
Yeah, that's all part of it. So, bearded fans of this podcast, this book is for you.
It is my comic. I can actually have a Comic-Con cosplay now.
There you go.
So, all right. Well, thank you so much again, Charlie.
Thank you.